Is XRP really the new gold standard? As in, will it be convertible to gold at a fixed price? And will it make XRP extremely valuable in the future? In short, I think so, yes. But it won't just be convertible to gold, but rather 20-something other significant commodities and anything else that can be digitally published to the XRP ledger. To answer these questions, I'm going to dive into what the gold standard is, its history, and then tie that into how XRP is well positioned to become the new gold standard. XRP is actually already convertible to gold. The Swiss are pretty smart, so check this out. I'll have the link in the description. But organizations are already creating gold-backed stablecoins on the XRP ledger, including Russia and Iran, and actually many other countries as well. But I'm going to talk about more on this later. First of all, did you know that for the last 200 years, an ounce of gold was able to buy a well-tailored business suit? In fact, gold has maintained its purchasing power for thousands of years, where fiat currencies usually lose all their value in less than 100 years. It says the average here is actually just 27 years. And then the USD, which is, quite a strong currency, has been for 90 years, but only 40 of which it has been fiat, because fiat means fake money. Basically, it's not backed by gold. So for 40 years, it hasn't been backed by gold. So gold used to commonly be accepted as money up until 1933, where the gold standard was suspended and an executive order from the president was given so that all citizens had to hand their gold into the Federal Reserve to be exchanged for gold-backed notes. Kind of creepy, honestly. People who opposed this would have been charged with fines, jail time, or even worse. This was right after the stock market collapse and near the beginning of the Great Depression. There was significant geopolitical instability during this time, kind of like now. And the fact that people were holding less gold and more paper notes made it really easy for the government to issue war bonds, which basically were money made out of thin air without increasing their reserves of gold. Also, they seemingly needed the money for World War II, but it came at the cost of inflation, of course. And then here are the war bonds. So even though that the war bonds caused inflation, it didn't matter because the Americans won the war and they became rich by selling tanks and planes to Europe and Great Britain during the war for gold. And then after the war, and this is directly from the IMF website, the Americans owned 70% of the gold in the world, which is why the reserve currency was so powerful. It goes without saying that America was in the power seat. So in 1944, President Nixon and others made a deal with 44 other countries. Sorry, it wasn't President Nixon. Who's the president? Oh, I think it was Roosevelt. Let's see if I'm right. Oh, I was right. Yeah, Franklin Roosevelt. Nice. So in 1944, President Roosevelt made a deal with 44 other countries to create a new financial system where all other countries were to convert their currencies to the US dollar for international trade, and the US dollar would be backed on a 1-to-1 ratio to gold. This is called the Bretton Woods Agreement. Thus, the US dollar as the reserve currency was born, and it's worth noting that no other reserve currency in history had been coordinated in such a way, with everybody meeting in where was it, New Hampshire? Yeah, and then agreeing on this reserve currency. And so after the war, America prospered and had a really strong dollar with enough purchasing power for common people to afford houses, cars, food, and all the basic necessities by working any old job. And honestly, isn't that what the American dream was? Life was good, but since everyone was using paper currency and not physical gold to transact, it was easy for the US Treasury and the Federal Reserve to create more paper notes than there was gold, with few people noticing. Other nations found it strange that the US could afford how much it was spending on things like the Vietnam War, manufacturing, and international trade. It's like they were cheating somehow. So France called their bluff and asked for all their gold back in exchange for all of France's US dollars. And guess what Nixon did in 1971? He just said, no. And then suspended the convertibility. And let's watch this video of President Nixon. It's honestly really creepy.
The third indispensable element in building the new prosperity is closely related to creating new jobs and halting inflation. We must protect the position of the American dollar as a pillar of monetary stability around the world. In the past 7 years, there's been an average of one international monetary crisis every year. Now, who gains from these crises? Not the working man, not the investor, not the real producers of wealth. The gainers are the international money speculators. Because they thrive on crises, they help to create them. In recent weeks, the speculators have been waging an all-out war on the American dollar. The strength of a nation's currency is based on the strength of that nation's economy. And the American economy is by far the strongest in the world. Accordingly, I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
Imagine it's 1971, you're with your family, microwaves just came out, you're eating your TV dinner, you're watching your favorite TV station, and boom, Richard Nixon just pops on the TV, doesn't matter what channel you're watching, and starts talking about the gold standard. Oh man, that's creepy. Oh my gosh. So yeah, Nixon gave some really great excuses for doing this, as great politicians do. The main reason, and there are pros and cons. So the main reasons he gave to suspend the gold standard was to combat the economic problems that the United States was facing at the time, such as high inflation and a balance of payments deficit. So they're cheating, basically just like paying off their deficits with fake money. The gold standard limited the ability of the Federal Reserve to expand the money supply and stimulate the economy. By suspending the gold standard, Nixon was able to give the Federal Reserve more flexibility to print money and expand the economy, which helped to lower unemployment and reduce inflation. ... In the short term. Additionally, the increasing cost of the Vietnam War and the Great Society program had put significant pressure on the economy. The Great Society program, if you ever watch or ever hear about the war on drugs and stuff like that, and basically gentrification, but they called it beautification of America. So that program would cost a lot of money and put significant pressure on the economy and led to a deficit budget, which in turn put pressure on the dollar. By ending the convertibility of dollars to gold, Nixon was able to devalue the dollar, which created an advantage, making American goods cheaper in foreign markets. So people wanted to buy American goods, and then boosted exports, which helped to improve the balance of payments for America. But then obviously that pisses everybody else off because they're kind of cheating. I mean, they are cheating. However, so this all came at a cost for the U.S. citizens, because the dollar was no longer tied to gold. The Federal Reserve was able to print more money, which led to inflation. This decrease in the value of the dollar made imported goods more expensive, and it also reduced the purchasing power of Americans. In addition, the credibility of the U.S. as a safe haven for foreign investment was tarnished, which increased the cost of borrowing for the U.S. government, which made it more expensive to finance the federal budget deficit. In short, suspension of the gold standard opened the door to decades of inflationary monetary policy, which has caused high levels of income inequality, which we're seeing to the extremes today. everyone's dream of having a regular old job and affording housing, food, and basic necessities began to fade, and here we are today. So imagine the economy is like a lake. And this is actually a really great picture for this metaphor I'm about to give, and I'll explain in a second. So imagine the economy is like a lake and money is like water in that lake. The government, like a dam, controls how much water flows into the lake by creating or destroying money. Since 1971, and especially since 2008 and even more in 2020, the government has been allowing more water to flow into the lake by printing more money, which is similar to a dam releasing more water into a lake. This has caused the water level in the lake to rise, similar to how prices in the economy rise. And just like how too much water in the lake can cause flooding, too much currency in the economy can lead to inflation. Also, just as different countries have access to different natural resources, some countries may or have more water than others. Similarly, some countries have more control over their currency than others. So in the past, the government had a system in place to control the flow of water into the lake, similar to how the gold standard was used to control the amount of money in the economy. But in 1971, just like a dam breaking, the government had to suspend the system, and money started flowing into the economy like water gushing out of a broken dam. The reason this picture is really good for this metaphor is that this is the Hoover Dam in 1983. And during 1983, not only was the Hoover Dam flooding, but also the US economy was flooding with paper currency, and thus led to high inflation during those times. And of course, since the US is the world's reserve currency, the entire world feels the effect of that inflation. So, during times of uncertainty like this, it's important to own things that are both scarce and valuable. Things with unlimited scarcity are doomed to be valued lowly. For example, just think about water. It's the most valuable thing on the planet, and yet its lack of scarcity in some regions makes its monetary value next to nothing. Whereas if we were stuck on a desert island with no water, you would pay someone everything you own just for one sip. So that's enough of water. So going back to gold, although gold is likely and will likely be valuable in the future and has stood the test of time, we can't know the supply of gold and what it truly is because governments and central banks underreport what they own. We know, however, that XRP has 100 billion tokens, and there will only ever be 100 billion tokens. It is incredibly valuable as a medium of exchange and will likely save businesses trillions of dollars in transaction fees long term. It's baked into the cake. So it has both known scarcity and unknown but likely very high demand. This is not financial advice, but rather I'm stating the fact that during changing economic times, things with both scarcity and utility become extremely valuable. So, to answer the question, will XRP become the new gold standard? In a way, yes. If things remain on course, digital assets, for example, new digital coins backed by gold, will be trading via the XRP ledger. Gold-backed stablecoins are attractive because they hold their value, and using XRP for cross-border trades is attractive because the user saves time and money like never seen before. Yes, XRP will be convertible to gold and already is, but it will also be convertible to gold, backed stablecoins, and in the future, potentially oil, wheat, and other commodities, and even real estate. Please remember this. You will need to own something that is scarce, has intrinsic value, and be patient to become a legend.